Howdy, folks, and welcome to your storm chasing forecast show for Tuesday, August 11th. I am Gabriel Harbor, and he is Cameron Nixon. What's going on, my man?
I'm pretty good, Gabe. Just got back from my week in Madison, Wisconsin, and coming back for another round of Ridge Riders, looks like.
Indeed, my friend, and I just want to give everyone a warning. If you notice the effervescent sheen across my face during this show, it is not
Ooh.
because I am descending from the SCC heavens. It is because I just got done leg daying before we started this, so I'm still like gasping for air. I'm really struggling here, so I'm trying to modulate my temperature. All right, Cameron, I see you've got the Outlook pulled up there. We got a nice little enhanced risk. At least the Ridge Riders are giving us
Sure.
something a little more to play with than these marginals that we've been batting around here. So, what are you thinking
Yeah.
about high level for today?
Yeah, definitely high level. It's pretty hard to not get what the SPC is trying to get at here. Potential for a long swath of damaging winds, perhaps a long-lived bow echo, and I don't want to throw around
Just
any
say the word.
keywords
Say
that no,
it.
I'm not going to say it, not going to say it, not going to say it, and a broad 2% tour throughout that whole area. That said, as a photogenic storm chaser that I am, definitely also want to talk about this target today, even maybe a little bit more than the wind target, because I think there could be some nice sights to be had up here. So we can go just top down. What we're dealing with is, again, this kind of northwest flow, a little bit more zonal than it has been in days past. But you can see some embedded short waves. One of them in the morning, kind of over southern Wisconsin, northern Illinois. Remember, we're recording these very early in the morning. And this evolution is likely happening as you're watching this video. And so this short wave is going to kind of spin down here throughout much of the mid-Atlantic, while another kind of speed max starts forming out in the northern plains, and maybe even just a little bit of a shortwave here at 500. If we go down to 700, might see a similar story. See our morning shortwave here over the Midwest here and southern Great Lakes, again kind of moving down toward the eastern seaboard. And then you can see another shortwave developing here, kind of over northwest South Dakota, southwest North Dakota. So these are undeniably our main players for today. Finally, some semblance of organization in this pattern. It seems like we're definitely dealing with two kind of discrete, organized kind of events here.
We are currently running a massive sale on our remaining 2027 Storm Chasing Tour seats, so you can book the trip of your dreams and save hundreds or even thousands of dollars. Sale ends Wednesday, August 12th at 11:59 p.m., so don't delay and reserve your seat right now. Link in the description for more information.
So we could throw up our temperature map just to get a sense of how the surface pattern will evolve throughout this period. Pretty weak surface pattern here across much of the Midwest. So no real kind of like sharp warm frontal features or cold fronts, dry lines, what have you. And then out in the northern plains, we have some of this easterly flow wrapping around this really strong low here off the lee of the Rockies and northwest Kansas, southwest Nebraska. And this is going to kind of funnel in all that dew point rich air from behind these MCSs all the way up, almost even into Montana, possibly. And so this is going to yield a dry line up from the Black Hills area up to eastern Montana. And so this is going to be potentially forcing these storms up here. And so I can actually show dew points rather than speculating about them. And you can see kind of this very large tongue here feeding into this area in the Dakotas and even potentially Montana. And of course, you don't even really need to see a dew point map in the summertime. You know it's going to be wet here in the Midwest. Low to mid, maybe even upper 70s in some places, even early on, are going to fuel some pretty robust thunderstorms. So kind of what we're banking on here is that we have a large enough complex from our overnight convection here in the morning hours on kind of eastern Iowa, southern Wisconsin, northern Illinois, that can kind of take advantage of this really rich moisture air mass and continue moving down with that mid-level jet down to the kind of mid-Atlantic. So we can look at what our cape will be like earlier in the day, probably when you're about watching this video, and you see some pretty absurd cape values for this early. Kind of reminds me of Appleton type buoyancy here. Lots of it. Do I think there's going to be tornadoes of that caliber today? No, not necessarily. That said, this is definitely more than enough to sustain a very large and vicious complex of storms if one were to roll into this area. You have over 4,000 cape here for a surface-based parcel, and even quite a bit of sin here. So this might actually keep things a little bit more organized. Maybe you don't have all this kind of popcorn, gross convection here, but maybe you only kind of sustain one rather organized convective complex. And even earlier in the day, we have, I would say, sufficient shear. However, this is not like, I don't want to throw this word around, but this is not like derecho style shear. One of my friends, Andy Wade, is actually researching derechos and the Hodographs of those. For a truly high caliber event, you'd want much stronger shear throughout this layer. So while this could certainly support widespread wind and potentially even significant severe wind, there's nothing that really screams to me that this is a truly impressive derecho-like environment. We can look later on in the day and we still have kind of this moderate, mediocre shear here and still this kind of loaded gun, really rich moisture profile. So definitely impressive. I think we could certainly sustain kind of a long-lived, damaging wind swath from this event, but it might just kind of be a middle-of-the-road sort of deal here. And I've definitely seen some signal for maybe some recovery after this MCS. I would not be too kind of keen on that if you're looking for supercells or tornadoes. You still have that huge cape recovering behind those MCSs, perhaps even a little bit too much sin to actually fire anything. Maybe a little bit of better low-level shear here, and then I'll kind of move over to the NAM, see how that environment kind of looks. And same story, a little bit better of a hodograph here on the NAM. I definitely think we could get another round of convection, but I'm not sure it's going to be overly likely. We'll take a look at cams later on just to see how right or how wrong I could be. But I guess if you're a structure junkie like I am, the main story will definitely be up here in the Dakotas with that returning moisture. Let's just use the NAM for this, and we can start plucking some soundings up around the Rapid City locale. And this looks very nice if you are a structure chaser. Very strong and kind of equally distributed shear throughout the entire column here. Winds gradually increasing with height throughout. Fairly sizable cape, right over 2,000 here, even with just a 58-degree dew point, which we might actually overachieve that up here. And very dry air loft here. So this is definitely a profile that you can sustain fairly long-lived, low precipitation supercells in. That could be particularly photogenic. But as we go later in the evening, maybe I'll pluck a couple down near the Badlands. Look at that hodograph. Wow. I like this a lot. And this thermo profile is pretty cooked here near the ground, but could definitely still sustain an LP that kind of just shrivels up and vanishes in a probably very smoky sky up here. Maybe something else and more toward the border of the Dakotas. Maybe a little bit better moistness here. You got a 63-degree dew point, more cape here, and our hodograph is still looking pretty fantastic. So this is a pretty robust supercell environment up here. Would not be surprised to see several hail reports, maybe even significant severe, if you get a storm that lasts long enough. Maybe you can pluck some HRRR soundings just to see what those look like, and it's pretty much the same story. So definitely used about this area up here from a chasing perspective, and equally intrigued for this area down here from an impacts perspective.
All right, Cameron, I have a few questions for you if you don't mind, sir.
Go for it.
First of all, the hodographs you had pulled up, some of the better looking ones a few moments ago, am I off here or did that look like the Forever Meso?
Oh, that was up here in the Dakotas?
Yeah.
Wouldn't quite say that.
Okay.
Definitely, yeah.
Not that one, not that one.
Ooh, maybe
The one that looked like there was one that looked like the letter M. There were a couple of them that you pulled up, and I was like, wait a second, is that the Forever
no,
Meso?
I know exactly what you're talking about. Maybe something like, man, let's see if it's this one. Yeah, it's like this one.
Yeah, exactly like that.
Awesome. Yeah, for the Forever Meso, I think I'm feeling a lot more low-level shear Typically, these are kind of oriented in this kind of quadrant of the hodograph. Really intense streamwise vorticity, and then actually weak shear above that boundary layer. That's for whatever reason that seems to be a discriminating factor of long tracked non-cyclic tornadoes is that really intense boundary layer shear and fairly weak shear above that. And this hodograph is pretty opposite of that. It has really weak low level shear and really intense cloud layer shear. And these tend to support really long lived mesocyclones and hail potential.
And for those who are wondering what the heck a forever meso is, one of the first experiences I had with Cameron's work was actually a crazy awesome blog article that you put out. Was that also a research paper that you did with the different types of hodographs and what you can expect with each of them?
That was a while ago. Yeah, that's still on my website. I've really been meaning to do a Supercell type field guide. But yeah, that's still there. If you search Forever Meso on my website, you'll probably find it.
Absolutely recommend doing that. It is a crazy good article. One of the first things that turned me on to your research and thankfully led to you being a part of Storm Chaser coaching.
I appreciate it, Gabe.
As far as like a plan for chasing goes, just whenever I see events like this where that big first storm complex going through is going to be a really like blobular mess, and then there might be some stuff along trailing outflow afterwards if it can, like you said, punch to the cap and actually tap into some
Yeah.
recovery in the area. For a chase like that, I like kind of just getting ran over by the first storm. Just go find a nice
Yes.
place to watch it roll in, just get absolutely blasted by it. And then if there's anything left
Yes.
when the pieces are getting picked up, maybe you can chase that as well. But if not, at least you got to experience something awesome.
Yeah, I agree. And it's definitely not outside the realm of possibility to get a pretty good structure show in the morning, especially if you're from Eastern Iowa, Northern Illinois, especially if something like this comes true, right? Fairly dry boundary layer here and lots of sin. We could be working with some kind of elevated storm complex cruising over this area in the morning. And I would think the thermo profiles might be pretty good for some nice shelf structure. That said, as the day goes on and things saturate, I definitely did pull some more saturated soundings and saturated boundary layers. Let me see if this is a good, yeah, something like this. This would not be very good for structure because we'd be really clouded over here. So, especially if you're on the tail end of this complex, might be a pretty good show.
Good stuff. And I think that's enough questions out of me. People have been waiting. We're finally going to give it to them. It's been like a week. Cam versus Cams. Take it away.
It has. Wow. Yeah. So let's look at hers rendition of what things might look like this morning as you're watching this video. And it shows this kind of complex of storms, remnant from our overnight convection. Interestingly, though, maybe some storms forming earlier on in this kind of area. I think this would probably tamper the potential, intensity of this system coming in later. So we'll definitely have to watch that. But still shows a fairly robust, very robust system coming through in the morning. Again, shelf cloud aficionados unite somewhere over north central Illinois. Definitely would not be surprised to see some epic pictures coming out of that if the low level stratus cooperates. And this thing just continues plowing through down to the kind of mid Atlantic. So I know the environment is not overly intense, but if we have a system last this long, it's not out of the question, I think, to get a derecho. It just might not be one of the kind of epic historical proportioned derechos out there.
They're all beautiful,
Um,
Cameron.
they are, in their own way, they are all beautiful. And also, her seems to be South Dakota play. A couple storms, maybe some splitting storms forming over the Badlands. That would just be, oh my God. I'd pay to teleport there. And even up to North Dakota, several supercells here. And look at how low precipitation they are. This, like, bar none, if anything close to this solution came true, this is a true chase day. So if you're sitting in Watertown, South Dakota, like I know Alex is, and you're trying to decide between the enhanced risk down here and the slight risk up here, it is a no-brainer. Definitely chase up here. RFS, let's take a look. This is the 18Z. Let's see if I can get the latest run. Looks like we're not quite out yet, but we can see what the 18Z kind of thought of today's setup. What are we doing here? And supercells. in this area as well. Actually, pretty similar stories of her firing some over Rapid City and then some again over that Dryline area up in northwest South Dakota. Would not be surprised to see some pretty amazing structure here in LP supercells, as it seems like the probability of getting storms up here is actually rather high. Also down in the kind of windbag area has a similar story with that convection early on, blossoming into a long-lived convective complex, maybe even some development after the fact down into Indiana that also grows upscale. I think the biggest kind of wild card was the NAMS solution, which had a kind of a much weaker complex coming in the morning, and then whatever this is also in that time frame. This, I'm just going to leave it at that. This is out to lunch.
That's the
More on
Giga
that later.
Squall.
Wow. That is quite the. But it is interesting, though. I'll give it that the herd did have something like this, too. So maybe there is kind of this elevated moist layer or elevated kind of warm frontal boundary that we didn't quite pick out in our analysis that does trigger some storms. And if that's the case, that would actually lead to a much weaker system coming through. And you can see NAM completely deletes this kind of windbag here and largely busts that kind of enhanced risk area. Even more interestingly, it actually takes this solution and now develops more discrete supercells later on. So maybe there is a possibility where if this early morning system is too strong, that makes the afternoon system weak, which makes kind of your late evening supercells potentially more robust. So this is all to say, I am Cameron Nixon. I have no idea what I'm doing. Thanks for watching.
Chalk one up for the cams once again.
Yes, sir.
Remember to check out those links in the description below, and then watch another video.